In this post, I will explain the goals of legal due diligence reports, information request lists, and the importance of legal DD in M&A transactions. Let's start. Goals of legal DD. Almost every M&A transaction involves a DD process, regardless of the jurisdiction in which the transaction would take place. This process usually involves inputs from multiple teams, such as financial, tax, legal, and technical DD teams. The legal DD may be carried out by the vendor prior to negotiating with potential buyers. In that case, the report prepared at the end of the exercise would be referred to as vendor's DD report. The DD may also be carried out by potential buyers following the execution of a non-disclosure agreement, NDA. In that case, the end product would be referred to as buy-side DD report. The goals of legal DD reports that are specific to vendor's reports can be summarized as follows. Provide the vendor company with an opportunity to decide whether it would be financially and/or strategically worthwhile to make the transaction altogether. Provide the vendor company with an opportunity to decide what percentage of the target company's ownership the vendor would be willing to divest. Enable the vendor company to do proper housekeeping before the parties commence negotiating transaction terms. This may include completing the missing permits or approvals, adopting the required board decisions, or settlement of ongoing legal disputes. Provide the vendor company with a realistic expectation as to the company's financial valuation in the market. And lastly, for target companies that are subsidiary of the vendor, how the business relationship between the vendor and the target company will be conducted beyond the date of closing. On the other hand, legal DD reports that are specific to buy-side reports can be summarized as follows. Detect or prove the absence thereof any deal-breaker issues which could be a ground for terminating the negotiations between the parties. Find out information about the target company which is not accessible from publicly available resources. Provide grounds for the negotiation of representations and warranties, Rep. War. Provide concrete data for an accurate financial valuation of the company. And lastly, provide a preliminary action plan for the post-transaction integration and smooth transition of the target company. Information request lists. In order for the buy-side parties and their legal teams to conduct DD on the target companies, they would need access to target companies' information. These information are often listed under a document called an IRL. The list is usually sent to the vendor's legal team. Depending on the industry of the target company or the nature of the transaction, the content of the IRL can vary. However, most lists include the following sections. Corporate documents such as articles of association, minutes of General Assembly, minutes of Board of Directors meetings, and a list of authorized signatories. Material agreements such as supply agreements, sales agreements, or lease agreements. Financial agreements such as loan agreements or financial leasing agreements. Property title records such as deed of the real estate properties or vehicle registrations. Litigation records such as documents as to the court proceedings or arbitration awards. Regulatory documents such as target companies' permits, licenses, or concessions. Insurance policies, this usually includes a list of assets that are covered by the insurance policy, and employment agreements, such as the template employment agreements. Depending on the industry of the target company, the list can also include domain registrations, especially important for e-commerce companies, IP registrations, such as patents or trademarks, especially important for technology and R&D companies, and correspondence with regulatory authorities, especially important for regulated industries such as banks and financial institutions. Components of legal DD reports. As a response to the IRLs, the legal DD teams are provided with required documents and a legal DD report is prepared at the end. Whether it's a vendor's report or a buy-side report, the reports usually have the following findings in it. Good standing of the company and its ownership structure, corporate organs and their functions, issues related to material agreements such as change of control clauses, termination rights, or penalties, issues related to financial cross-default provisions, good title to properties or whether encumbrances on the properties, summary of the disputes, list of pending or potential lawsuits, their likely results, and the potential liability amount tied to those disputes. Regulatory compliance issues, such as the absence of any licenses or permits. Insurance matters, pending insurance claims. Competition compliance matters, such as ongoing competition investigations or competition authority fines, if any. IP matters, such as IP infringement cases or pending IP right registrations. Employment-related matters, labor disputes, collective bargaining agreement negotiations, and such. And lastly, data protection matters, such as ongoing data protection measures, compliance programs, etc. The importance of legal DD reports. Conclusion of legal DD reports can be a make or break moment for a transaction. In the case of vendor's DD report, the vendor can actually abort the idea of selling the target company altogether. This can happen if the DD reports point out that there are too many housekeeping items that is not feasible for the vendor company to complete them in the short period of time. Or the DD report can point out that the valuation of the company should actually be much higher than the vendor's expectation. The legal DD report is equally, if not more, crucial for the buy side. It's absolutely common for the buy side parties to walk away from a transaction because of the findings of a legal DD report. It's also very common for the parties to negotiate a completely different price tag for the target company due to such findings. If the buy side's DD report fails to detect crucial issues pertaining to the target company, the buyer can face with disastrous situation and never be able to financially recover from the investment in that particular target company. Conclusion. To summarize the above, the goals of legal DD are various and essential to both buyers and sellers. Information request list is the main document which lists the legal team's document requests. The components of the report are aligned with the list. And lastly, the legal DD reports are indispensable for deciding whether a particular transaction would be consummated or not.